Hello, this is Frank of the 12 Gates, and today we're going to be talking about China and whether it actually appears in the Bible and whether it actually appears in Bible prophecy, and also really to see whether it actually appears in the book of Revelation, and if it does, which chapter does it appear in. While the whole world is watching Donald Trump, America, to see what they're doing next, and Kim Jong-un in North Korea and his latest nuclear missile launches, and Russia is the other one, isn't it, with Putin? What's he doing? He's in the Crimea. He's putting Russian boats off the coast of the US. We've seen reports of that lately. Everybody's focusing on that, and of course everybody's focusing on the Middle East. But the one thing that is right under our nose that nobody seems to be really taking a whole lot of interest in, the media do seem to cover it, but not to the extent that they cover, like, say, Trump and America at the moment. And that is China. And China is something that I think you really need to keep an eye on. It is mentioned in Bible prophecy, and it does appear actually in the Old Testament as well. And I'm going to prove to you where it actually appears in the Bible, where it's actually mentioned, and we will delve into Revelation and see where China actually fits into that. And also we will see the importance of the river Euphrates, very crucial part of prophecy that China is sort of mentioned in. As always, before I start, I'd just like to say that these are just my views, my opinions, my thoughts and ideas, and that's it. I'm just kicking a few things around and just showing you that a certain country that a lot of us think doesn't really play much of a role in Bible prophecy, you're going to realise that it does. And then you'll see that the movements we're starting to see in China recently, they will all start to make sense. If we start off with just China as on its own, just as basic as it is a nation that has a large proportion of the world's population. It is currently the world number 2 in economic terms, and you could say it's the world number 1 in many other terms. At the moment, the US is the number 1 superpower, but China is the number 2, and it is catching up fast. Some people say it is starting to overtake America in various areas. Their military, the land-based army that they have, numbers in the millions. They are currently, as everybody has seen in the news, they are taking over the South China Seas. They're building islands there, and they are doing something there that America's wary of, and also all the other Asian countries in that particular area. They are watching China very closely, and they, be perfectly honest, they haven't met with much resistance. America are sending ships over there patrolling. The reason why this is being built, they say it's for other reasons, but that they are major shipping lanes that transport a lot of the oil roundabouts that area where the major Asian economies are. If you take how China has dominated, you just got to look at eBay when you go on there. I'm on there all the time looking for cheap things, and you just see everything that is cheap, that the exact same product you'll find for a fraction of the price. And where's it made? You've got to get it from China and wait 3-4 weeks, but it's worth the wait, isn't it? And that's what's happening. They are exporting. It's an exporting nation, and they are building cities like crazy. Cities the size of, Shanghai or Beijing. They're building cities all over China now, and the whole country is becoming westernized, isn't it? And it's becoming a force to be reckoned with. Also, they have a lot of influence in the American economy. At present, the only thing I would say that is propping up the American dollar is the fact that the Chinese and the Japanese are buying up American debt. If they actually stop buying the debt, then what would happen doesn't bear thinking about. The confidence in the dollar would start to wane. They're starting to hit that 20 trillion ceiling, and they're looking to raise it further and go through that, isn't it? If China stops buying the debt, they lose confidence in America, and Japan the same, then basically there are some major issues. When we get into Bible prophecy, it is mentioned that there is a large force coming from the east. The recent headlines with China, which is quite shocking to be perfectly honest, is they are starting to build a military base. It's nearing completion now in Africa. And also they seem to be quite friendly with Russia. They've done a few deals with them recently. And Russia has, as we know, air bases in Syria. So what is happening is we are seeing, when I saw that headline, I thought this is a significant development here. We've got two major superpowers that actually are mentioned in Bible prophecy. They are circling around the Middle East region. So before I get underway, what we'll do is we'll start looking at the software very quickly. This is the main pane here, the main window where the actual Bible verse is under consideration. If it's highlighted in green like it is here, it's a single verse. If it's more than one verse, it'd be highlighted in yellow. And if the words are actually in red, then it's the words of Jesus. Over on the left here, we've got the Strong's. The numbers, Strong's numbers are here. These relate to the actual words. They can either be the Greek or the Hebrew translation that appears up here. It goes into more detail. If I hover over here, if I actually click on one of these, then it actually changes, and this is the blow up version of it here. Over here is the Treasury of Scripture Knowledge, and it gives you basically the details of what the chapter is all about. And then we've got the cross references, the all important cross references here. If I click on any of these, they come up over there and are blown up in more detail. On the second from top row here, we've got it tells you the book and the chapter and verse, and it also shows you it here. And then on the top row, these are the books, chapters and verses that are under consideration in the Old and New Testaments. And that is the software. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off right at the very beginning, and I'm not even going to mention China. I'm going to start off with the Euphrates. And if we're going right back here to the Garden of Eden, there was 4 rivers mentioned. Yeah. And what we'll do is just focus on the 3rd and the 4th one because they're in the same verse. We'll just read it. This is Genesis 2:14. And the name of the 3rd river is Hiddekel, that is it which goes towards the east of Assyria, and the 4th river is Euphrates. Now the Euphrates River, this one here, is incredibly important. It's a big river. This features in Bible prophecy, but it also is very important because it's one of the 4 rivers that's mentioned in the Garden of Eden, and this is we're just in chapter 2 here, chapter 2 of Genesis. This river, even in modern times, is really a river that sort of divides the east from the west. It's like a bridge, a crossing point, and this Euphrates plays a very important role in Bible prophecy in the later stages of, well, even the middle stages of the book of Revelation. So what I'm going to do is move on now to the first 2 Bible verses in the Old Testament that I can see that actually mention China. Yeah, And the people, there's no mention of China in the Bible whatsoever. There's not mentioned in Revelation. It's not mentioned in the Old Testament either. But they are there. They're mentioned as a race of people. And the race of people that they are mentioned as is the Sinite. Sinite. And it's funny that the first three words is quite interesting, isn't it? But if we read this, well, it's quite simple really, and the other one's exactly the same. This is Genesis 10:17, so it's a fair way down. And the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite. Yeah, and the Amorites are mentioned here in the previous verse. Canaanites are mentioned just below. Yeah, the Sinites are a descendant of one of the sons of Canaan. Yeah, but this is the very early Chinese, and also we've got them here. And the Hivite and the Archite and the Sinite is mentioned in 1 Chronicles 1:15 as well. And again, if we click on it, it just comes up the same thing again, because it's the same race of people. Now, if we move on to Genesis 11:9 and 8, this is the Tower of Babel. Yeah, and this was a very crucial time. Basically, there was a lot of people there, and they all spoke pretty much the same language. And what happened was they built a tower, as we all know, and God saw this tower, and he didn't like what he saw, and basically he destroyed it. And he scattered everybody, so that they were scattered to all the four corners of the earth, and they ended up speaking different languages. Yeah, and that might explain the situation that we have today, isn't it? And what's happening, we're seeing now in modern day times, is we're seeing the reverse of that. Everything's starting to come together again now, isn't it? We're heading towards those Tower of Babel times. Well, let's just read these verses. It's Genesis 11:5-9. So this is after they built this Tower of Babel, and the Lord wasn't happy about it, because basically man was starting to get a bit too big for his boots, basically. So let's read it anyway. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And this is where a lot of people are saying is where the Sinites, they were in this area here, because I just mentioned Genesis 10. If we go back there, the Sinites were mentioned there, and this is just one chapter before this, so they were in that area. These actually got scattered, and they became what we know today as the modern day Chinese. So moving on to Revelation, this is where things start to get interesting, because you think, well, how do you know this is China? But if you listen to this verse, I'm going to read it, I think, all the way down to about... We'll keep going all the way through, because it's quite dramatic. This is the sixth angel, and it's the sixth trumpet of Revelation. Let's have a read of this. Revelation 9:14, where it starts. Saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Mentioned again. Yeah. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these 3 was the third part of men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. What I want to do is just focus on, go back to Revelation 9, 15 and 16, because some people say this is possibly China mentioned here. But let's just go back to the 4 angels which were loosed at the river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. Yeah, if we go to the cross-reference here, it's Psalm 68:17. And just to get some clarification what this actually is, let's have a read of this. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai in the holy place. Yeah. Now, what I'm reading into this is just reading it as it is. There's 4 angels here, and there's an army of horsemen which number 200,000. I don't think these are people. I think these are angels by the sounds of it, if we go by that Psalms. That's what it sounds like to me. But some people are saying, and I could agree with that as well, it could be, and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. There's only one nation that has a military that comes anywhere close to that number, and that is China. It's the only one. And it's funny because, again, this river Euphrates here is mentioned again, just as it was in Genesis 2:14, and it's mentioned a number of times in the Bible, and it's mentioned again in Revelation 16:12, which we'll look at after this. It's a very similar situation again. That is in the Vials, and that's it's the second from last judgment, I think, what it is. But this Euphrates River, many say it divides the east from the west, and there is a mention of the east coming into. There is a massive influx or invasion coming from the east, which brings us very nicely onto Revelation 16:12. This is the 6th vial. This is after the arrival of the beast and the beast system, which is mentioned in chapter 13, and also the false prophet. But this comes afterwards. Let's have a read of this. Revelation 16:12, and you'll see that there's a mention of China, or China and other nations mentioned in this vial. And the 6th angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates again, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs came out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to do battle of that great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And he gathered them together in a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. And this is the formation of the Battle of Armageddon. So this here, if we go back, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water therefore was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. The kings of the east is referring to, many are saying, Asia. Yeah, and many people here are saying this is China, maybe China, Japan, and associated nations. Yeah, and it's funny that when you get into the dragon is mentioned here, and what is the symbol of China? It's the dragon, isn't it? But the dragon that's mentioned here, that is Satan. The beast that is mentioned here, that is the Antichrist, and the false prophet is the second beast, isn't it? When it comes out, rising out of the sea. In chapter 13, it's mentioned here as the false prophet, but it is also mentioned as the second beast. So, but this is where things get a bit complicated, because people say that the sixth vial or sixth bowl, because it mentions the river Euphrates, it's the same event as this one here. Yeah. These two events, they run parallel. What's mentioned here, this huge army, is the very same thing that is happening here. Yeah, and I shall go into explain that they're not the same event.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is focus
and I shall
on
show
this,
you the reasons why.
Revelation 16:12. Let's read it again. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. Now, this is the sixth vial, which, we're anywhere near that yet. But I think this here, some people are saying that the river Euphrates has dried up. But when you get into the river Euphrates, I think there's 12 dams on there now, and the biggest one is called the Ataturk. It's absolutely massive. And basically, mankind has created the ability to dry up the lower reaches of the Euphrates with these dams. They've got that capability, which is pretty much basically what they do. They just reduce it to a trickle or a fraction of the size of what it normally is. So if the river has downstream dried up, that's not because of this prophecy being fulfilled. It's because the dams have stopped the flow of the water, isn't it? If the water behind the dams dries up, then I would say that's more of a prophecy fulfillment. So I don't think we've seen this yet, but people are saying that it has dried up. Now, the fact that China have got a military base now in Africa, that would suggest that they have crossed this Euphrates, which, as I keep saying, is a very significant borderline between the West and the East. And China is in the East, isn't it? It's just a thought. But, there are similarities between this Revelation 9, 16. But, when you go through it, it's a third judgment, isn't it? A third part of men were killed by the fire and the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. Yeah. This one here, this is the Battle of Armageddon, isn't it? It is the assembling of, I suppose, the beast and his armies. They are assembling, aren't they, in the false prophet? Yeah. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, that is Satan, and out of the mouth of the beast, that's the Antichrist, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. And for they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. But it's the kings of the east. These are the ones, looks like they may come first. Yeah, and if it's the same people, I think this is a different event. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, that's 200 million. And I heard the number of them. Yeah. It's a difficult one. It is a difficult one, this. Some people say these 2 verses, well, all the trumpets and all the vials, they all run in parallel, but I honestly think these are separate events. I just can't. There's similarities, but there's a lot of difference. The Euphrates does tie them both together, but there's no mention here of the Euphrates drying up at all. Whereas this one, it is, and that is a significant thing, because that is a big borderline that allows the kings of the east to cross and enter into that area. Yeah, so when you actually look at the military might of China, it's got the largest military by far. This is just the straight numbers for the military. That's the regular military, I think they call it, and they've got about 2.3 million. I think America's got 1.3 million. Funnily enough, North Korea is, I think it's similar to the levels of America, I think. And the same with South Korea. For some reason, they've got a very high military presence. If you actually take the reserves and the paramilitary and put those, join it up, it comes out that North Korea has got about 7 million for a small country as that. So North Korea is a country that is not that big, but in military terms, it is a force to be reckoned with. But I still think China is the one you need to keep an eye on. Just the basic regular military army is about 2.3, 2.4 million, and it's one of the lowest percentages in relation to the population of the country. The population of China is about 1.381 million, say nearly 1.4 billion. 1.4 billion people. You compare that to America, and that is got about 335 million. That's the difference. It's 4 times bigger, isn't it? 4 times bigger in population terms. The world population, as far as I know, is about 7.3 billion. So you're talking about a fifth. Yeah, just under, about a fifth or a sixth. Between a fifth and a sixth of the world population is in China. So that puts things in perspective. If they actually put their mind to it and increase the percentage of people that actually are in the army to just the same as what most other countries have, about 200 million, which would tie up with that, what is mentioned in Revelation 9:16. Whether this here is what is actually happening in this one here, the same thing, is unclear. But I still stick to the fact that Revelation is basically pretty much in chronological order. Some sections are summaries, some sections may run in parallel, but the book is laid out in a certain order, and I think the trumpets and the bowls and vials, they are similar things, but I think they happen at different times. Yes, China has some other attributes that are quite interesting. The symbol of the nation of China, by no coincidence, is the dragon. And the nation has always embraced religions such as Taoism, Confucianism and Buddhism, which fly in the face of Christianity. The recent headlines, I would say over the last decade, have shown an increase in Christian persecution in recent years. Really does reinforce the view that things haven't changed much in post-communist China. Here are some rules enforced on Christians in China, which number below 1% of the population, but it is rising rapidly. Firstly, Christians are consistently forbidden the right to do any public evangelism of any kind. Private worship is reluctantly permitted, but gospel preaching is banned. And Russia has also started doing this as well. Secondly, directives to the state-controlled churches warn pastors not to preach the message of revelation, what I'm actually talking about here. Thirdly, Sunday school teachers are not allowed to discuss the day of the Lord, predicted in both the Old and New Testaments. And fourthly, the Olivet Discourse, recorded in 3 of the 4 Gospels, is forbidden, and which you could say is the most important outline of prophecy in Scripture. So, in summary, China is not directly mentioned in the Bible, in the Old or New Testament at all, but it is mentioned a number of times indirectly, and it looks like it's possibly going to be part of the Battle of Armageddon, and it's going to play a major role in that battle. And I would say certainly the nation's movements and actions and its increased military focus look to be moving towards fulfilling Bible prophecy. And China, as a nation, cannot be ignored in global terms, nor in biblical prophecy terms either. But anyway, as I said, people, these are just my thoughts, my opinions, my views and ideas on China and its role in Bible prophecy. What I'm going to do is put some extra links in the description box, and they'll direct you to some further reading that I suggest you go to, which will go into more detail on the Sittonites and how China does appear in various parts of the Bible. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into some monumental video. So don't forget to be blessed, and I shall catch you in the next video.